Hello all, Vincent Paracella, and this is my research proposal PowerPoint presentation titled Social Media's Correlation to Suicidal Ideation in U.S. Teenagers for the class MSBS 444-032, Research Methods and Statistics. Thank you for viewing. Motivation for the study. I wanted to do this study because I was a user of social media. I don't know if I would say heavy, but I did use a decent amount of social media since I was a teenager, especially when MySpace came out around 2003, 2004. I was a freshman in high school, and I have experienced the emotional impact social media has, both the positive and negative side of it. And I also understand and have researched that the suicide rate is rising in our country, and I am curious if there is in fact a correlation between the two. The purpose of the study is to determine if there is a positive correlation between the increased use of social media and suicidal ideation among teenagers in the United States. The proposed method of research is randomly selecting participants who will take part in a survey and questionnaire. Participants who obviously use social media and are within a certain age group, but I'll get into that later. The data collected will be analyzed, and it will determine, or hopefully determine, if a positive correlation does exist between the two. Social media really began to rise to prominence in the early 2000s, especially with MySpace, as I mentioned before, and as I used a lot when I was a young teenager. Although social media can be both a positive and productive experience, studies have shown that there is a risk for decline in mental health for those who constantly and diligently use it and perceive what they're exposed to as reality. The grip these platforms have, emotionally and mentally, can lead to serious downfall of self-esteem and self-appreciation, and provide a feeling of loneliness despite the many, quote, friends we may have. It's important to determine whether this negative impact is contributing to the steady growing suicide rate or suicidal ideation generally in United States teenagers. Although a useful and convenient tool in networking with others, social media has evolved into an extension of a person, and it's significantly used among those between 13 and 19 years old in the United States. Teens often use social media as a way to seek affirmation or attention, and this rapid electronic communication often delivers dopamine and other chemicals associated with substance abuse and gambling addictions, delivers them to the person's brain and makes them feel good. This can lead to an addiction to social media, and although it may lead to positive feelings, the strong bond can leave one dependent on it and considerably influence their emotions. There's growing evidence that social media does lead to pre-suicidal emotions such as depression and anxiety, and the question does remain how influential it has been on suicidal behavior and ideation in these teenagers. This research proposal addresses the following question: does increased and heavy consumption of social media have a positive correlation to suicidal ideation in U.S. teenagers? My hypothesis is that yes, in fact, the significant use of social media among U.S. teenagers will demonstrate a positive correlation to suicidal ideation and behavior. In 2017, suicide was the second leading cause of death among American teenagers, only second to unintentional injuries. Suicide stems from depression, and the adolescent age group has the highest prevalence of depression in the United States. Depression and other mental health disorders have shown to develop or be aggravated by the use of social media among these vulnerable teens. These platforms can expose teenagers and adolescents to many different physical, mental, and emotional changes that may lead to a decline in mental health. According to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, the suicide rate among teens has steadily and noticeably increased throughout the years, and this is likely not coincidental with the growth in popularity of social media. Now I'm going to be going through the constructs of my research proposal. The first one is history of social media and the effects on adolescents. Although the roots of connecting with multiple people at once began decades ago, Listverse made its debut in 1986. allowing users to create a mailing list to communicate with others at one time. This is, as we know it, the idea of email today. But this initial concept evolved into chat rooms, instant messaging, and eventually the broad worldwide platforms of today, such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The rapidly and continuously growing abilities of these platforms make them really enticing, especially to a younger crowd. And the ease of access and use of the modern smartphone makes communicating and connecting with others extremely convenient, rapidly leading to more use of social media platforms. Social media has both positive and negative effects on the adolescent. Positive connections with those who share similar interests or staying connected with friends who have moved away are examples of instances that can have affirmative emotional effects on the teen, especially one who's in a difficult situation. Alternatively, teens can be exposed to cyberbullying, addiction, as well as feelings of wasted time, jealousy, and low self-confidence, usually coming from other users' false representations of themselves and the realities, making the teenage user of these social media platforms feel jealous or not good enough. These feelings and emotions could inevitably develop into depression and anxiety, especially in teenagers who are at the higher risk. The next construct I'm going to be talking about is depression and suicidal ideations in United States teenagers. Depression is becoming increasingly prevalent in United States teenagers. Adolescents aged 12 to 17 have the highest rate among U.S. age groups of depression, with 13.3% reporting having experienced a major depressive episode in 2017. Depression in adolescents may have many contributing factors, some more than others. These risk factors include but aren't limited to bullying, being a victim to or witnessing physical or sexual violence, substance abuse, or unsupportive environments, just to name a few. Depression, whether acute or chronic, can lead to suicidal ideation and behavior. Of United States high school students in 2017, 17.2% reported to have seriously considered attempting suicide. Furthermore, 7.4% of high school teens reported actually attempting suicide. Less than half the teenagers who reported experiencing depression shared that they received treatment for the depression. The last construct I'll be going over is adolescent depression and suicidal ideation's correlation to social media. Multiple studies conclude and demonstrate that social media does have an adverse effect on mental health. However, it should be determined whether there's a trend with the use that is contributing to suicidal ideation, behavior, and ultimately success. This can be difficult because of multiple other contributing factors. However, there is sufficient data to show a relevant trend. The relativity correlates to the likelihood of mental health detriment based on these experiences, with a study revealing a 4% decrease in odds of depressive symptoms for each 10% of positive social media experiences versus a 20% increase in odds of depressive symptoms for each 10% of negative social media experiences. This study was conducted on the age group of 18 to 30-year-olds, which includes a portion of the target group of teenagers in this proposal, but it harbors a majority of those who are generally more mature and developed than the target group. In theory, this would likely be exacerbated using teenagers alone as the studied age, because they're generally less capable of emotional regulation, especially in the younger range. The relationship between depressive symptoms and suicidal ideation is highly correlated. The amount of social media use has increased approximately 80% in the last 15 years, with about 90% of late teenagers using at least one social media platform. It would seem feasible that the rise would correlate to the approximately 56% increase in suicide rates among teenagers in the same frame, as social media has been, if not the most significant, one of the most significant, expanded and widely utilized industries in the world. Research conclusion. Social media has well-researched effects on human emotion and well-being, especially in regard to negative aspects. Effects include possible depression, which has risen approximately 52% in use aged 12 to 17. Throughout the years, social media has also grown. The relation between depression, suicide, and suicidal ideation has been well documented. With the presented information, it seems definitely feasible that social media is likely a contributing factor to the rise in suicidal ideation and behavior among U.S. teens. Moving on to the methods section of my research proposal. I'll start with research design and rationale. The study is going to be using quantitative approach to include ordinal and interval levels of measurement. The intent is to measure the participants' frequency and history of social media use, as well as their history of depression and suicidal ideation and behavior, in order to establish if there is a correlation. 2 introductory questions will be asked to determine the participants' opinion of the importance of the topic and whether they believe social media affects mental health, followed by 2 screening questions to determine if the potential participant is even qualified in that they actually use social media and do not have any prior mental health conditions diagnosed prior to their use of social media, if any. The data will be collected using a Likert scale questionnaire containing 11 questions related to the variables. There will also be related interview questions and a demographic question section at the end. Here's a quick review of my questions. They include introductory questions, screening, survey, interview, and demographic questions. As you can see, I'm using a Likert scale in a couple sections. Using 4 choices opposed to 5, or even numbers instead of odds, ensures the participant chooses one side of the spectrum as opposed to picking that neutral option. I think it gives way for better data. The demographics questions essentially gives me an idea and see if there's a pattern of participants who are choosing a certain way or giving certain answers to questions that come from a specific demographic, so I can try to find a trend in that way. Participants in the study are going to be teenagers from 13 to 19 years old residing in the Portland metro area. Those who have been diagnosed with or experience a history of mental health disorders would not contribute to the validity of the study and will be filtered out using screening questions in the questionnaire. This study would not be biased in its demographic application and will include participants from middle and high schools within the Portland metro area, being Multnomah, Washington, Clark, and Clackamas County. The teenage target group is chosen because they're maturing, yet not fully mature. They tend to be easily influenced based on mental and emotional changes they're experiencing, and they're heavy users of social media. In the study, they're going to have agreed to and signed an informed consent prior to participating. A paper survey will be administered to middle school and high school teenagers during the short lull in their school day. The school locations are going to be throughout the Portland area and include urban and rural schools. An assigned trained researcher will be present during the administration of the survey and administer it themselves. They will be there for any questions that need to be answered, and the students can simply just raise their hand and speak with them privately if they have a question. The students will be advised to answer all questions to ensure equal data distribution, after which the researcher will collect the surveys and answer any questions the students may have. Because of the participants of the study being in their teenage years, a notice to the parents either by mail, newsletter, or other form of communications normally used to correspond by the school will be sent out advising of the study. Parents or guardians will have the opportunity to refuse their students' participation either by written notice or the phone number or email provided. Once the test is completed, the researcher will collect the survey questionnaires from the participants in the group. The questions in the survey will be grouped to the specific variable they represent, followed by a quantitative analysis of the collected data. The analysis will compare the mean scores of the responses in each group using a t-test, which will determine the strength and significance of correlation between the quality and frequency of social media use to suicidal ideation among the examined group, expressed as p-values. The primary researcher in the study is a moderate user of social media and is far from his teenage years in life. He has no relation or correlation with anyone in their teenage years who has committed suicide, and he is unbiased in his approach. The data collection procedures will be conducted by trained volunteers who receive no incentive dependent on the results of the study. The specific names or identifying information of the participants will in no way be released, even by request, and will only be maintained during the course of the study. Participants will receive an informed consent form that must be signed in agreement before administering the questions. Because of the sensitive nature of suicide and mental health, participants will be notified that they do not have to divulge their names if they choose not to, and may instead receive an identifying number that will be included in the questionnaire. Care was taken to ensure reliability of sources and citations were issued for outside information used. Suicide is a tragic issue, more so when it comes to teenagers and young adults who have plenty of life left to live. Unfortunately, suicide is on the rise and it seems there is still stigma present in obtaining help. This research proposal aims to uncover a problem if there is one, which would hopefully lead to a solution that would save many lives. Thank you for taking the time to view my presentation.